Drew, welcome to Real Pod. I'm so excited to chat with you because I just feel like we're always like mutual friends, similar circle,
Yeah.
never actually getting to like have that one-on-one moment. So
I
I'm
know. It's been a long time coming.
I'm super excited. So thanks for taking the time and congratulations on Loud, Accept Nothing Less Than the Life You Deserve.
Thank you.
That's major. By the way, obsessed with the cover. I
Thank
mean, the shot
you.
of you, the color. I'm sure there's like lots of different options, but I think you slayed it.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I love the cover. The cover came together quite quickly. I joke about like the hardest part, honestly, in the process was coming up with the title. Shockingly, that was like the hardest part. But past that, like the design was so easy. Like the team was just incredible. And I picked that cover first. I was like, this is calling to my spirit. I love
Yeah.
all the colors and the brightness and boldness of it. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I
I
love the
feel
cover.
like Loud though, like makes the most sense. Like I'm shocked that there were ever like how was that not the immediate thought?
I know, for real. But now that we've settled on it and we've been talking about it so much, like it makes so much more sense. But in the early stages, I remember the proposal was named something else, and it was a working title. And then I remember when we were discussing the actual title, one of the chapter names was actually the title that I originally pitched, which is I'd Rather Die Alone. So I think the loud part was really cool because we were kicking around a bunch of ideas. And then I actually came up with Loud and the subtitle, which I'm really proud of. So it once we said it and said it out loud, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot more sense. It just fits. So
It's so funny that you say that I'd rather die alone because that's actually one of my favorite things that you preach is like, why do women feel like being alone isn't an option? Like, I'd rather be
yeah,
a shitty guy and like in a shitty relationship, which by the way, I know too many of. Like, and
yeah.
we go to bed at night, Max, my husband, and I feel the same way as you. Like, I'm like, all men except mine. Like, mine is
Yeah,
great. Like, I got
right, for real. There's an asterisk next to mine.
I know. Um, and we'll talk about it like, how is this girl like she's so beautiful, she's all these things. Why are you with this just total tool? Like,
Yeah.
because society's told them the literal worst thing that could ever happen to you is you don't ever have a man.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I've explored those themes heavily in the book, but also just in my platform, I mean, I've talked about how like there are far worse things in life that could happen to you that have nothing to do with marital status, relationship status, like let alone dating a man. Like there are far worse things that could happen to you in your life. And, past that kind of morbid take, when women describe that feeling of like wanting, I think wanting and desiring companionship is a very natural and human thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think feelings of loneliness are very normal and they're very human and they're valid. You can validate feeling lonely. I just think to think that you are alone is just a really cheap way of describing your foundation or your community. Like that includes family and friends and women in your life that you love and care about, like, or people who don't identify as men at all. And I think that when we feel lonely, that doesn't always mean we're alone, right? So when I would made peace with it before I started dating my boyfriend, I remember thinking like, I'm not actually alone. I just feel lonely, and that's okay. If I feel lonely, I can validate that and I can say, you know what, I wish I had someone to share this with, or I wish I had someone to, talk to about my day. Like those are very natural human things, but I'm not actually alone. Like I have a beautiful, wonderful family. I have a great circle of friends. Like the way that women build community with each other is something that I think is so special and so unique and so intimate in ways that are not sexual or romantic. It's just like the way we support each other and cherish each other and love each other. Like it is so unique to like sisterhood or womanhood, whatever that looks like, or just building community is so much more than just who you date, right? So I feel like when women have these feelings of loneliness, that's okay. But it's important that you remember that feelings are like waves, they ebb and they flow and they don't stay forever. They're very fleeting. So as soon as you felt lonely, you could not feel lonely, right? So I think if you shift your perspective on what really matters to you and what's more important, is to focus on not the fact that you're feeling these lonely feelings, it's the fact that you are never actually alone, if you really think about it. And I think that's why the few women who are in relationships with men that maybe deep down or subconsciously they know they could do better than, or they don't treat them the way that they deserve. I think that's just the patriarchy and misogyny just working its very evil tentacles into everyone's brains. The important part is to diagnose it and be like, understand, okay, does he make me feel good or bad? If it's bad, then maybe I should reevaluate. Should I be with someone else who doesn't make me feel that way, right? I made a video once where I said, like, if you're not quite there yet, you're just taking the scenic route, and I'll see you when you get there, girl. Drive safe. That's what I always think, like, drive safe, take care of yourself, right? When
Yeah.
you're ready, you'll meet me there. Like we all have the same destination. At least I hope, right?
I love that. And I think it applies to just other things in life where you're wanting someone that you love to have an awakening or do the right thing or make a choice. And like, because you've seen the change in your life and
Yeah,
good for you. So just this idea of like, okay, they're taking the scenic route and they'll meet me. And you know what? What's sad is it could be in 10 years. It could be in one.
yeah,
You don't know. But you
yeah.
know what else I was thinking as you were talking, Drew, is what's almost the most sad thing is when women think, okay, if I settle with this guy, even though he doesn't treat me right or I'm not happy and I don't really think this is the one for me, you're still alone. You might have someone that's sitting across the dinner table from you. It's like almost for society's perception of like, they won't know I'm alone. But
Yeah,
my heart breaks thinking of how they feel like living in their own home because
yeah.
they don't actually have the companionship.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I feel like I've made it a point to tell women when they ask me about stuff like that is if you're asking me, I think you know the answer, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do if my boyfriend makes me feel, stop right there. If you're asking me and you don't even know me, like you don't know me at all, we have no personal intimate relationship, we don't have any sort of connection outside of parasocially, right? And you're asking me, you know the answer. You just want to be validated, right? Which way you want to be validated really just depends on where you're at, right, in your journey. And that's why I feel like whenever I've talked about this and women have told me like, oh, my best friend or my sister or my mom or whatever, they're in relationships and it really pisses me off. They don't listen to me. I try to tell them. I always tell them to hold space for them. I understand it may be exhausting trying to convince someone that you love that they deserve better, but I think offering them a place of love and support is much more helpful to them than judgment because it comes off as judgment, right? When you're like, you're so like silly. Why would you put up with that? Why would you do that? And sometimes there is a time and a place for that very tough feelings conversation. But most times I think what women really need is love and support. Like they just need an open space to express how they feel. And if they ask for your opinion, then you can give it. If they don't ask, maybe sometimes that's one of those things. Maybe that's the Virgo in me, because sometimes I'm like, do you want my opinion or do you just want me to listen? Because if you just want me to listen, I'll be here to listen, girl. You know what I mean? Like I'll just listen, and then if you need my opinion, you'll ask me. And it took me a while to learn how to do that because I am a know-it-all at my heart. So like it took me a minute to learn how to do that. But thankfully with maturity and therapy, I've
Right.
been able to understand it's a lot more effective in that way. Some people like more of a tough love approach, but I think there are more people that can't handle tough love than can. And I think people lie about that a lot. So like it's
Yeah.
okay if you can't. Like tough love is not always what you need.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need an ear, you know what I mean? Someone to lean on. And then I just tell people hold space for her, be there for her, but don't enable her. You know what I'm saying? Like don't like encourage like, oh no, he's awesome. Like don't lie to her, right? But just at the same time, just be patient. Like she'll hopefully my hope is that you'll get there eventually, you
Yeah.
know?
If you don't have
So
anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And hopefully that
exactly. Sometimes you just want to hear it. You know what I mean?
right. I was going to ask if you went to therapy. You said did a lot of work on yourself. Did you go prior to this being your career?
Yeah, I was actually entertaining the idea of going right after I got fired, which was in 2020. So I was entertaining the idea of going because my sister was going. I never had any negative thoughts about therapy. I honestly just believed that I didn't think my problems were nearly big enough to warrant therapy. And I thought like, I don't need therapy. Like that would be me taking up space in a area where maybe mine aren't as serious. Like some people really, genuinely really need it and want it. And I don't want to like encroach on the space that maybe I'm not worthy of being in. now that I am in therapy, and honestly, this job was a huge catalyst to me for real, being like, yeah, I need to go to that. Yeah, actually, I need to go to that immediately. Which I'm sure you know, like you need it for this kind of job, especially. Whenever people, creators ask me like tips, I'm like, get a really good lawyer and a therapist. Like those, you get those two unlocked first, and then you can worry about everything else. But yeah, I started going probably I want to say mid to late 2022. And is when I started consistently going. And it has been life-changing for me. The way that I'm such an advocate for therapy, it's crazy.
Right.
I highly encourage people who can afford and want to go, please do. Like, it's just, oh man, it is so helpful in so many ways.
So helpful. Like I
Yeah.
constantly, I think the athlete in me likes to just keep getting better. And I think the mind is the thing that's part of everything that you do. Did you play sports?
I did, yeah. I played soccer my whole life, like, and I almost went to college for it, but then I got an academic scholarship, so I went on that instead.
Yeah. And we both studied sports journalism. So I similarly thought
Period. Look at us.
I thought that's what I was gonna do.
Yes,
Like we use our degree, like we're writing a caption, like we are.
totally. And editing and learning how to talk on camera. I've told people before, like, I'm probably one of the few that I've gone to college and like my degree actually really does help me in a lot of ways. So as does yours, I'm sure.
So speaking of college sports, so actually that was the reason that I first started going to therapy. Was it was just really hard for me, like struggling with performance anxiety. I ended up falling into this depressed place and just got to a spot where I literally was like, it's clear I cannot help myself. And that's the reason that I went. So your
Yeah.
sister told you about it in 2020. It wasn't until 2 years later. Do you remember
Yeah.
the moment or the week that you were like, it's time?
Yeah, honestly, my sister at that point had been going really consistently. She at once my platform really blew up, she started telling me, I really think you should go. Like she was really being very consistent. I think because she knew that doing this for a living, even when you're someone like myself who has a borderline delusional level of confidence, like mine is very high and very like prominent. But the internet can be a very, very tough place to exist as like a person and let alone a brand or a business. So the faster it grew, the bigger it grew, the more hate I got specifically from men. That was kind of when I was like, all right, I think I need to go. Because like I was like, that was honestly around the time I was like, I think I should go. And it was more so, I think, and you can probably relate to this too, like the problems that you encounter in this job specifically are ones that you would never experience no matter how many jobs you've had. Like, no matter whether it's blue collar, white collar, or anything in between, like service industry, retail, like there are elements I think that you could help you, but there are just problems that I've never been prepared for, like having to deal with, like death threats and doxing and, people like following you and people trying to find out where you live and like even if they're fans or they're people who hate you, right? So like that level of exposure on a public level is not something that I learned how to deal with at all, and let alone my brain, how to process the emotions that come with that, especially with the kind of hate that I get. Like the vitriol that I receive is on another level. Like it's on an unbelievable, unprecedented level just in sheer amount. But as far as like what they say to me is very, very, very specific. So I think around the time when it became like a trend to hate me by every man who is unemployed and under 6 feet on TikTok. Like when it became a trend to hate me and they would clock 1 million views just by talking shit on me, essentially. Around that time when it started catching fire like that was like, yeah, I think I need to go to therapy. Because like I need to go and I need to talk to someone who has no tie to this world and no tie to me. And I need to like get out how I'm feeling about stuff and learn how to process. And that includes like how I'm being perceived just in looks and not just by people who hate me, but like people who love me. You know what I mean? Like when you walk carpets, when you get Gettys taken, when you do interviews, when you do high res cameras, like you're looking at yourself from all these different angles and you're looking at yourself in ways you've never seen yourself before. And I was like, I need to go to therapy. I need to go to therapy. I need to get this out of my brain, get this off my spirit, off my heart, and then I'll start to figure out better ways and better frameworks to like process how aspects of this job make me feel. And thankfully, it's been a godsend. Thankfully, it's been the best thing in the world. So very
Your
thankful.
obviously clear niche of, being this huge crusader, especially for women, which changes so many lives. I don't think I've seen a video of yours that there's not a comment that's like, you helped me leave this terrible relationship, which I'm sure the same way I'll have people tell me, oh, you changed my life. It's like, it doesn't really register because you're like,
Yeah.
I can't really feel that, but it's easy to see it and the impact that someone else has, like yourself. But in choosing like this as your path. I literally remember the first video I saw of yours. I forget which one it was. It was 2020. It was like in a car. It was your laugh that got me at first. I was like, wait, but that first video, were you responding to like just a terrible man said something and you just had to respond? Or do you also have ties back in your childhood or your early life where like you felt victimized or attacked by terrible men and that's why you've had such a fire to keep going?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, as far as my disdain for awful men, that's been a constant. That was like I came out of the womb irritated, if I'm being honest, but I think specifically with men, they trigger a prey drive in me that I cannot even really verbally like say. I can't even describe accurately how upset they make me. But I think I've had that feeling for a very long time. Now, if you're asking me if I've ever had a terrible experience with a man, yes, of course I have. I exist in the real world like most people do. That's honestly not exclusive to me in any way, shape, or form. Whether or not that's like shaped, who I am and how I handle it, not necessarily. Like there was never anything that like distinctly happened to me that was like, you know what, like I'm gonna start being fucking mean. I just always have handled disrespect that way. It really didn't matter who it came from. It's just always from men. Like they again, they are a constant. They do not deviate from pattern hardly ever. So if they're committed to being horrible, I'm committed to being mean. And that's just the parallel we've been running in my entire life. And I think as far as TikTok goes, I honestly, because I'm 28, I'm gonna be 29 this year. So I grew up with the internet. Like I grew up on YouTube and Vine and in the early days of Instagram and Facebook and MySpace and all of that stuff. And I've consumed content from influencers and everything well before I became one myself. And so when I got on TikTok, I first of all felt way too fucking old to be there. But second of all, when I started like consuming actual content that wasn't just like dancing or trends, I was honestly shocked at the amount of vitriol I saw on that app, like specifically from men about women. Like I was just genuinely shocked that they were so comfortable platforming such awful things. Like I did not understand because I had never consumed content like that ever in all my years being on the internet. And so, in the YouTube heydays, like that was not the thing that people liked. Like people loved to watch my June favorites or like a vlog or like a Tarte brand trip. Like they were always these things that were very lighthearted and very different. And I think social media kind of shifting a little bit and going from we want to see perfection, great lighting, great cameras, great sound to I want to see something a little bit more real. I think that like pivot was great, but I also think it let in a lot of awful people. Like it gives them like the opportunity and the drive and the like I don't even know, like this the ambition to platform messaging, no matter how hateful, just so they could build a following. And I think the gift of virality is a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. And I think people getting the chance to be influencers or make money from home or what have you, especially during 2020, right? I think that just incentivized a lot of men who are like, you know what? If I made one video talking about how much I hate fat bitches and it gets a million likes and it gets 200,000, like it gets a million likes and 8 million views, then oh my God, I could be an influencer. Which like makes no sense because nobody wants to follow awful people. Like it just like awful people who have platforms are only followed by awful people. So like the lifestyle you're gunning for, you're not gonna get because brands aren't gonna work, but they're not very smart, so they don't put those things together prior. But it wasn't anything I think that like anything in particular. It was just I saw how awful and prevalent it was, and I was like, well, if we're all having a discourse, then I want to jump in too. I want to give my 2 cents, and then you give your 2 cents, and then we'll all have fun. But apparently, I was the only one having fun when I started. So
But your family is very tight knit and great,
totally.
supports you and very feminist. So
Hmm.
that's probably been great is to have that support from the men in your life.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's another thing too. If anything, when men are like, "Oh, fatherless behavior," which they say to me all the time, which makes no sense, but I always think like you're actually wrong. Like I've had the most prominent male figures in my life, my entire life. That's how I know for a fact that you're not shit. I know that for a fact because I've seen what men actually are like or should be like, and this isn't it. Right. So I know what actually exists and what is possible, and this is nowhere near the same. So I'm not putting up with it, you know?
I want to talk to you about the male gaze
Oh
because
yeah.
that a big part of your book will center on like removing men from the center of how
Mhm.
function. Um,
Totally.
and I think the very first time that I processed like male gaze and
Mhm.
how it affected my life, it was a Julia Fox video
Okay,
where she
see.
said, when, or was it Emrata? Forgive me, both icons confused.
Yeah. Love
One
them both.
one of them said, like, when you're intimate with a man, are you thinking of how he looks or how you look to him? And I was like, shit. Like, I feel like I'm thinking of how am I looking based on how I've seen the women in the movie looking? Like, it's more about
Totally.
how
Totally.
am I acting? Am I acting like a sexy woman in this moment? And I was
Totally.
like, oh my God, this is crazy.
That's tea. That's actually a great way of describing the male gaze. That's fucking tea. I love that. The way it was posed to me that helped me kind of be like, okay, period. That makes a lot of sense. Was like if you look at movies specifically and you look at like Thor and Loki, most men would say that women are attracted to Thor because he's all muscle, he's like big, he's strong, he's everything that you would perceive to be masculine, right? But most women are attracted to Loki. And Loki's thing is not looks. It's not like he's not sexy or hot to women because he's the biggest and the strongest. He's sexy and hot to women because he's smart and he's intuitive and he like pays attention to women and he like follows them. It's like it's very misguided. Like the way that men perceive women is not as women. They perceive them as objects that are there to exist for the pleasure of a man. So they see them as things and things to enjoy and things to look at, whether it's like to objectify or to use. So it's the male gaze being described to me that way. I was like, okay, T, that makes a lot of sense because it's like it's for the same reasons that when I made videos defending book talk and I was talking because I was getting tagged in these videos of men talking shit on those fairy smut books, right? Like whether it's Akatar, Fourth Wing, Crescent City, all those popular ones, Stone Glass. And when I was making the video, I was explaining like you're missing the fucking point. Like is smut part of the book? Sure, right? But sex is a part of most entertainment, whether it's TV shows, movies, whatever it may be, books, right? I said that's not the part that women are drawn to. Like the part is not the sex itself. The part is everything before that, which is the way they see her, like the way they talk to her, the way it's like the romantic shit they say. That's what's getting women to be like, yeah, I'm gonna read this fucking book. Yeah, I'm gonna read this book. Because it's the way that they see women and how they hold them in high regard as equals. Yeah, shocker. Women are super into that. Like they're good looking, these fantasy men are good looking. They're whatever tall, sure. But more than that, they're smart and they care about them as people. Crazy how that works. Like it's crazy how women like they desire emotional intimacy way more than they do physical. And men who are awful don't understand that.
Are you watching Bridgerton?
No, I'm so not. I'm so behind. I tried to watch the first season, couldn't get into it, but one, two, and then I know three's with Nicola, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I
I
watched it so bad, but everybody told me I have to watch season one and two first, and I was like, fuck.
should, but the reason that I bring it up is because, it's a Netflix show, it's, glamorized, whatever, but there are some things about it that are like, true to history. And even the
Mhm.
way, like, if women are left alone with a man unchaperoned, like you're ruined your whole life
Yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
your innocence was taken or whatever it was. Like, whereas the men in the show are at the bars every night having sex with all these people, and every single woman who's featured in the show is like a virgin. Like she doesn't even know what sex is. And I know
Yeah.
that the show is not like totally historically accurate in everything that it does. But I do think if we like rewind the clock, it's crazy how much undoing we're having to do still
Totally.
now of like the slut
Totally.
and like the men who think they can walk all over women and you just
Mhm.
watching that show, I'm like, I can't even believe there were times it was worse than it is now.
Yeah, yeah, can you believe it? Yeah, it's crazy how that's why I said it's the patriarchy and misogyny is so sinister and it works so secretive in a lot of ways. Like it's genuinely really upsetting when you really think about it. And I talked about this in the book about me unpacking my internalized misogyny is a very uncomfortable and sometimes painful process because you have to really strip everything down to the studs. Like you really have to understand, like ask yourself everything that you love, your interests, your hobbies, the way you talk, the way you dress, the way you do your makeup, the way you do your hair, all of those things at one point or another were influenced by how men would perceive it. And that thought makes me sick to my stomach. The way that I had to unpack that, I was like, oh my God. Like, even the way I used to dress in college, like, and mind you, when I was in college, I was still a pick me at the start, but then I really quickly unpacked it because I had a really great, solid group of friends that I'm still friends with to this day, all women who truly, right, they really helped me, I think, become the person I am today, become a better person. If you had asked me when I was 21 if I loved the way I dressed and I was like confident in the way I dressed, I would have been like, yes, of course I am. Now that I've unpacked a lot of that, especially in therapy too, I've come to realize that is not at all how I like to dress. I just thought men would find me attractive if I dressed that way, which they did. But shocker, they'll do that to you no matter what. Like if you're being objectified, they really don't give a shit what you're wearing. They actually don't. So when I was unpacking that, I was like, I actually really do love like really big, loose fitting things. I love wearing platform shoes. I never used to wear either of those things in college because of my internalized fat phobia and also my internalized misogyny. And then my internalized misogyny with being tall. I hated how tall I was. But if you had asked me when I was 21, I would have been like, no, I love it. Even though I refused to wear heels and I didn't like wearing platforms ever. Now all my shoes have platforms. Like I hate wearing a shoe without a platform now. But that's because I'm actually dressing the way I want to, not the way that I think men want me to or would appreciate if I did. And I think that process is very upsetting. Like even the way you talk, the things you like, the things when I got fired from the NFL and I was in therapy talking about it, I had to unpack. I'm like, did I even really like football? Or did I just think
Wait,
that that made me different?
so I look back on wanting to be a sports journalist and it's
Mhm.
literally, well, I loved being in front of the camera. I loved like,
Me
you
too.
know, recording. I loved talking. There were things about it I liked, but
Same.
I also wanted to be the hot girl in the male area. Like I looked
Same.
at the Erin Andrews or the Sam Ponder and I was like,
Right.
I got to be the chosen one. Like you're the one.
Absolutely.
There was definitely a part of it where they were like, well, what if you did this and it was just your voice and no one could see you? Like the job's not interesting to me. Like, right.
That's it.
We
Yeah,
just
for oh, then forget it. Actually forget
get
it.
it. We just
I'm not kidding. Same thing. That epiphany that I had, especially specifically with that, because for me, I can, even though I was a pick me, like every girl was, every person was at some point or another. I the one thing I drew validation from always was my accomplishments, like the things that being the best at things, whether it was sports, school, or both of them. That's where I drew all of my power and validation. So when I got fired, obviously that was a huge blow to my confidence that I had never experienced before. But past that, when I was unpacking it, I was like, what if everything I've ever believed was awesome about myself has been centered around a man? Oh my God, the way I was like, oh, I'm gonna freak out. Like I was literally so like the renaissance that I had and the like, oh my God, like because I had been building to that since I was like 14, 15 years old. So to think to myself that I committed a huge portion of my life, my education, my degrees, like all of the hours I worked, all the days I stayed up, like all the panic attacks I had trying to finish on time, like all of those things, all in service of a man. Oh, I'll freak out.
yeah.
Oh, freak out immediately. So it's honestly kind of ironic and really full circle that now, like, my true purpose and my literal job is to terrorize them. Like, holy shit. I'm like, that is my actual purpose. It's crazy how that works.
Do you
So,
think
like,
relationship has been helpful in that because I think like I've done a lot of work healing my own body image issues. I had an eating disorder, like I just really struggled in college. And now having like such a secure relationship, I feel like because I have this secure relationship with this great guy, slowly all the things I used to do to appeal to men in general have just like dissolved over time, not become at the forefront of what I do.
There is something to be said about how, because I get asked about my relationship all the time. Obviously, it's like just so ironic to people. I terrorize men for a living and I'm in love with one. But I have said many times that like me having a male partner, me having a boyfriend is for me personally, it's almost the most divine conviction that I was right about everything. Like I was like, if I stay true to who I am and I don't lose any piece of myself for this person specifically, and I don't lower standards and I don't change the things that I want, I don't shift my goals or my dreams, and this person loves me exactly the way I am, and he just so happens to identify as a man, like if that happened, and it did, then I was right. Like I don't have to, like that's literally how I see it. I was like, I don't have to shrink. I don't have to be quieter. I don't have to be less loud. I don't have to be less flamboyant or whatever the fuck. Like the way I'm super outgoing and I'm a very like social person and I'm an extrovert. I don't have to dim any single part of myself in order to find love and companionship with a man. And so I've told people who love me and love my content and they're attracted to men too. I've also told them as well, like, I am living proof that that's not true. That fallacy that they paint for everyone that, oh, if you if you speak up for yourself, if you stand up for yourself, if you're independent, if you refuse to put up with bullshit or anything, any sort of bigotry or whatever, and you don't settle and you don't change any piece of yourself. And by that, I mean like fundamental pieces of yourself. Obviously, you grow and change and evolve when you're in love with the right person. But I mean, like shedding pieces of yourself so they feel better and they feel taller and they feel stronger and they feel masculine and whatever the fuck. You do not have to settle in order to find a man who's going to love you exactly the way you are. And I think what you're saying too is very true. It's like once you get it, you're like, okay, so I didn't have to change. I didn't have to alter myself. I didn't have to shrink. I didn't have to do any of those things. I was just with the wrong person, you know? And that's not a bad thing. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it takes so much inner self-worth to like have the belief that like you are worthy of those things and deserve them and like can do
Totally.
your life. And those people who like their core belief is like I'm not good enough. I'll never deserve love. My parents didn't love me, so it's really hard for some people to have the courage to believe that with no facts in their life other than like them knowing it that they're worthy.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I think truly believe that's why I've been able to build a community online is because I am that person for a lot of people. Like what you just said is like some people don't have that person at all and they don't have a foundation, they don't have a community that has reminded them of those things. And if it's me every single day until they walk in it truthfully and purposefully, that I'm cool with that. And that's why I'm so proud of the book specifically because when we talked about the idea of writing a book, we leaned more towards the self-help route because that's kind of where I felt I would be able to be as close to my content as possible. I could like expand way more on the ideologies that I have and why I believe the things that I do. But at the same time, the people who love me and follow me, or maybe they're searching for that person and they need someone to constantly remind them, the book is a perfect opportunity for them to have that. And they can pull from it whenever they need. That doesn't always require me making new videos. And obviously, the front-facing part of my videos is being silly and being funny and entertaining. Obviously, I'm a comedian too, so I love to make people laugh and I love to make them feel good with my jokes and my sillies. And I'll make fun of men until the cows come home, girl. Don't make no mistake. I will humble them until I am 6 feet under. But but more than that, the book is not for them, it's for you. That's what I've told my audience many times. I'm like, this book is for you. It has nothing to do with them. That's the whole point, right? The whole point is to decenter them entirely. And I really truly feel like the book, and this is obviously me being biased because I wrote it, but I do think that it will help.
I have one more question. How do you like properly recharge and feel that mental clarity when a lot of the times like you are having to meet anger with anger?
It depends, because if we're talking about my platform, right? If you really watch my videos, I'm never angry. I'm having a ball and a blast, girl. Like I'm never mad ever in a million years. There have been maybe two videos in the hundreds I've made over the last 3 years where I am actually feeling an emotion outside of joy, like outside of that, which is just frustration or irritation. And there's been like maybe two. When I was younger, I used to have a lot of anger and I used to respond with anger very quickly and very often. And sometimes I'd get so angry I would cry. And I've actually gotten questions like that before where they're like, how do I approach these kinds of conversations, or how do I disagree with these men without getting so angry I start crying, or without getting so angry I start yelling? Because then they're like, oh, look at you, you're being so fucking emotional. Right. So they Uno reverse every fucking time. The goalposts are always moving. And when people ask me that, I've said this before, but like this is going to sound like a read, but it's not. You have to look at where you get your validation from. I realized later on in life that the reason why I would get so angry to the point where I would cry is because I was trying to prove myself to them. At the end of the day, all I wanted was to be seen and to be heard. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be heard, I wanted to be validated, right? That's all I really wanted. If you really think about it, that's all we really want, everyone, regardless of how you identify. So the reason why it would get so heated like that is because even then, I still wanted them to validate me. I still wanted them to tell me that they agreed with me, that they saw me, that they understood me. And what I learned very quickly is that when men have made up their mind about whether or not they see women as equals, and the answer is no, it doesn't matter how you tell them. They're not going to listen to you. Whether you yell it, scream it, say it in a monotone face, they're not going to listen to that. And you can never count on men who you don't know. You can never count on their reliability or their empathy. What you can always count on is fear. It's like the fear that they have. And for me, the way that fear manifests is being publicly humiliated on my TikTok. And so that's why it really just depends on what your goals are. And I think for me, I haven't been mad about men being misogynistic in a very long time. I haven't felt any sort of anger towards them in any capacity in a very long time. I let go of that anger a long time ago, and it has done nothing but serve me, letting go of anger. As far as recharging, just when I'm like kind of sick of hearing about it all the time, like with men being like, she's so mean. Every
Also
time they say that,
tagging you and everything. Like I'm sure every day you wake up and there's 1,700 videos you could be
oh
responding.
yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
stressing
All
as
the time. Yeah, I think with that, therapy was a huge, huge help. Another one is just taking a break. And by that, I mean just not going and looking. Just don't even go look for it. If I don't see it, I don't know it exists. So I don't need to go look for it, right? And then also understanding that even with the platform now, like my goal is not to, it's like obviously a byproduct of me doing this is antagonizing them, but that's not my actual goal. My actual goal is to uplift and empower all of the people that they hurt, which is everyone, even men too. Gay men are also trans men, they also exist, right? So their rhetoric hurts all of us. You know what I mean? That's the irony. The irony is me constantly combating patriarchy, misogyny. If they joined my cause, we would all win. But like they won't, and that's cool. That just continues to foster my business. I'm not gonna fight them on that.
yeah.
But my goal, I think refocusing on what my actual goal is, which is to empower and uplift and give courage and strength to everybody that their rhetoric harms. I think once I started shifting my focus, whenever I would get a little too caught up in the details and the weeds, that always helps me like recharge and refocus and be like, okay, that's not the goal. This is the goal, right?
I love that. It's been so cool to chat with you. You're awesome. I feel like you think so deeply about all of this, and it's so clear in just kind of the way you talk about it and the way you thought about it that like you've done a lot of work on it. It goes much deeper than like the funny video that people see. I'm sure this book is going to absolutely crush when it comes out.
It comes out July 30th, so almost a month. We're about a month and 5 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Drew. It was an honor. Thank you for coming on Real Pod, and I'm wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I love you. You're the best.
Really? Oh my gosh.